Hi, Gigi.
Hi. Good
I
to see
like burst with
you.
joy when I get to see your face. How you doing? Well,
Um,
congratulations. Day
day,
three of your
day
cookbook in the world.
1 to day 3 of the book being out in the world. So, so
How's the week going?
it's going well. I mean, I'm getting tons of feedback, and it's interesting to be able to work on a project for so long, especially 3 years, and a lot of it was alone, in my apartment during the pandemic, and to finally have it out in the world. And to have everyone kind of feel it and see it and get inspired by it. And some people will have already posted, multiple recipes that they've recreated from the book. So it's exciting.
Um, it's true when I say that I burst with joy when I see your face, and I'm really glad that now I can see it every single day
Yeah,
in my kitchen.
you were literally the
Um,
first person in the world to get the book.
I know. And I have to say, I felt guilty. I'll tell everyone out there this, that he sent me the book, when we talked about doing this talk together,
Yeah.
his publisher said, okay, as soon as we have copies, we'll send you a copy. So a couple of weeks ago, I opened my door and there was a package there. And I opened it and it's Gigi's book. So Gigi is what everybody calls him, AKA the mayor of Portland, AKA Chef Gregory Gourdet. Um, and so I took a picture of it and sent it to him and said, I got it. I got my copy. It's so gorgeous. I can't wait. And it turned out that I got a copy before you did, right?
Yeah.
And then about 4 hours later, I got a very angry email from our good friend, your co-author, JJ Good, saying the same thing. Everyone was pissed. And you know what? Too bad. I felt pretty good about having the book. I was the first person on earth to have this book. And as you said, I did promptly start cooking recipes. I don't think I've ever opened a book and gotten as hungry. And I mean, I have a lot of cookbooks, and your book is, I mean, it's celebratory, it's beautiful, it's heartfelt, but it also is so completely personal and also uh, cookable, which I will say from a chef is not always the case. And
Mhm.
I'm so appreciative of that as a home cook, to be able uh, to open it up and start cooking from the pages. So thank you for this book.
Yeah.
You not necessarily think you were going to become a dad so soon, ever, if, and here you are, because it really is like a labor of love in every way.
Yeah,
Um,
I think for me it was really important. Yeah, when I set out to write the book, I honestly don't recall the exact moment when I decided I wanted to write a book. And like, I'm really trying to think to like when I had like that, like I'm gonna write a book, and like I can't really picture that moment, but I do remember like being like, hey everyone, I'm gonna write a book, and just telling like all my colleagues and coworkers that hey, I'm gonna write a book today. And I actually was on a trip to Haiti for the first time in about 20 years, and it's really where I started writing the book there. I had all the ideas for most of the recipes. I'd say about half the recipes I had those ideas in my head, because oftentimes, well, I would think that for your first cookbook you kind of think of all your best dishes that you've ever made if you've been a chef, and you want to start with those. But I really started writing that book like on the plane to Haiti, and just kind of hanging out in Haiti. And that was 3 years ago, getting up to something that was good enough for a proposal. And then 3 years later, here we are. But I really just wanted to create something that even if you didn't come to my restaurants or knew who I was or hadn't seen me on TV, that you could pick up the book, purchase the book, and it would be helpful to you. And it would help you eat better. It would inspire you to kind of have more exciting ingredients in your pantry, and show you inside the mind of a chef, in a step-by-step way to kind of make things just a little bit nicer at home. Nothing too technical.
Well, it's interesting because there's a piece of this book that I feel like everyone needs to see a better vision of it without cutting me off too much. There's a piece of this book that I think is very different than the chef who's, been leading restaurants for the last decade. There's a lot of food here that is a lot different than the food that you cooked
Mhm,
over the last, 2 decades of your professional cooking career.
mhm, mhm.
Um, but it's very much you, knowing you and having the pleasure of being able to see you cook and taste your food and then eat beside you, most recently, which has
Uh-huh.
also been a joy. Um, I think what strikes me is that this is like the This is the in real, like the IRL Gigi, you know what I mean? Which isn't easy to do.
Yeah.
So I have about 1,700 questions. But I want to kind of take people back a bit because everyone's going to get a book and everyone's going to cook from this book. And I'll tell you what I'm cooking from. And I want to know what recipes you want us to start with, what people should start with. But let's just go back in history a little bit because your trajectory as a chef, I think, is fascinating and speaks so much to who you are as a person and the journey you've been on, but also to the ingredients in this book. I mean, it's a very personal story. You say that you came to cooking late at the beginning of the book, and not necessarily, through traditional ways. Tell us a little bit about when you decided to cook professionally for a career.
Sure. I think oftentimes a lot of chefs have, memories of cooking with their parents or cooking with their mother or cooking with family members when they were younger. And I don't. I don't have those memories. I have memories of eating all the time, eating like the lavish meals that my mother would make on Sunday, or like going to visit my grandma in New Jersey after going to church in Queens on Sunday, and having like Sunday like supper with her, and her making poule noix sauce, which is Haitian style chicken. The aunts that would visit us and stay with us while my parents worked 2 jobs. So I grew up with all these memories of just eating a lot of Haitian food, but I actually didn't cook. My mom just was just always on it, and we always had,
still is, by the way.
Yeah, yeah. We always had some type of maternal figure kind of helping us and feeding us and making sure that we were taken care of. My father cooked a little bit as well, not a lot at all. But for me, it really took going to college, and this was after like a couple of majors. I had started my career at my education at NYU. I was doing pre-med. I realized, that really wasn't what my path was going to be. Both my parents have worked in hospitals their whole lives.
They're scientists, right?
Yeah, my mother was a microbiologist, and my dad was a chemist in the hospitals throughout New York City, Brooklyn, and the Bronx. So it was always like, oh, you should go to medical school. You should go to medical school. It's like, the son of immigrants, you move to the country, you want education. It's like a very traditional story. Become a lawyer, become a doctor. But, that I quickly realized chemistry and biology, were a little bit over my head, and I still wanted to do something connected to the environment through that. So I moved out to Montana to study wildlife biology. And I ended up just having to feed myself for the first time, pay my own rent for the first time. And that's where I started cooking. It started with like cooking like pasta. I would buy cookbooks, like the Moosewood cookbook, like
that was my first cookbook.
I was vegetarian. So,
me too. Don't tell anyone. I have a career to uphold.
It was definitely a moment. So I just like started reading cookbooks and teaching myself how to cook. And we'd have dinner parties and holidays. And my friend was like, "You should do this. You should cook at a restaurant." And I was like, "Oh, I've never really thought about that." So I took a job. My first job was washing dishes. And I washed dishes at this, the Hobnob, which is, the best, the restaurant in Missoula, Montana at the time. And then I started making sandwiches at this vegetarian deli called Freddy's Feed and Read. And, my friend Celeste, she was the one who was first taught me how to cook. I would make pasta salads, and, she would make sure you put enough oil so it's nice and shiny. I would make sandwiches, and I would make sure that, you get enough mayonnaise on every edge, everything's stacked nice and,
important lessons,
so and the chef at the restaurant where I was washing dishes was like, "You have a knack for this, you should go to culinary school." And I'm like, "Mom, Dad, I don't like this either, and I want to go to culinary school." And they're like, "No, you need to finish college, and then we'll support you as we always have." So I ended up getting a degree in French because I had been in college for quite some time at this time, and I had a bunch of French credits, and I was just trying to get out of there. So I hightailed it to the Culinary Institute of America, and I was in my mid-20s at this time already. And I had a great time. It was the first time I loved school. I had so much fun. I would sneak around and buy more meat, so my consommé was double in flavor. I would just obsess over things in class, and it was the first time I really, really felt that what I was studying was what I was meant to do. But I mean, I think the funny part of all of that is that there's so much chemistry and science and biology
Absolutely.
and environmentalism in food today, you know, and in the culinary arts and in our
Hmm.
industry.
Of
And
course.
so it actually all makes sense that my path led me to being a chef.
Yeah, same piece of the brain in so many ways. I mean, yes, there's an artistry, obviously, but science is, of course, at the foundation of cooking. And it's interesting. Um, but all this said, and we're going to come around to this again, it never occurred to you then to cook Haitian food. Were you cooking any Haitian food for yourself at the time?
No, because, you know, I was just diving into school and, you know, I dove into, you know, the CIA, and yes, there's international, but you know, it's very based on European cooking techniques for the most part, because a lot of organized culinary traditionally is based off French technique, and you know, that's amazing. It's excellent knowledge. Uh, and then I went to work straight at Jean Georges, which was again a French restaurant. I would definitely call it, you know, a very modern approach to fine dining, and Jean Georges was very renowned at the time for kind of, you know, lightening food. He, you know, championed using juices and reducing them to make sauces, using herb oils, you know, taking the fat, you know, not putting butter in jus and just reducing them so they're really thick. So there was already an element of, you know, making healthier food. And that's really what I started out with. And also using different ingredients. Jean Georges started his career in Asia, and he was obsessed with Asian ingredients. He had lots of Asian concepts. He was one of the pioneers of the fusion movement of the late 90s and early aughts. So I was always just working with, you know, ginger and chilies. And, you know, it took me going back to making,
Not the same chilies, not
no,
necessarily
not the same,
Scotch bonnets,
yeah, no,
right?
but, you know,
Thai chilies or
yeah, but, you know, that is really what led me into like my desire and absolute obsession with Southeast Asian flavors. But, you know, it didn't take me very long to realize, you know, when I decided, you know, hey, I've been working in all these types of restaurants and I've been traveling all over the world to do these events and to learn more about, you know, cuisine, to bring ideas back to the restaurant, you know, but I'm not focusing any energy on learning about my own culture. So, you know, about 5 years ago, I made a commitment to, you know, just work on my Haitian culinary repertoire. And I started, you know, I would go home and visit my mom and we would cook together and she would teach me things. And I've taken her on the road. But, you know, it didn't take long for me to realize, you know, all the Caribbean and, you know, tropical ingredients from Haiti and, you know, a lot of Caribbean countries are very similar to all the ingredients I left in Southeast Asia. So, you know, from an early age, that was part of me as well.
um, you address this in the book, of course, and I think we discovered the last time we were chatting that we were actually cooking for Jean Georges at the exact same
Yes.
time.
Yeah.
I was at Vong, his sort of
Mhm.
Thai influenced restaurant in 1999, and you were at Jean Georges.
Yes.
And it
Yes.
is entirely possible that my one time as a cook, I went to eat at Jean Georges. Because the only reason I could go was because I was working for him and I could get the friends and family discount.
Yeah. Yeah.
You probably cooked my lunch because you were already a sous chef at the time,
In
perhaps there.
'99, no,
Where were you in
actually, in
99?
'99, I was doing my intern. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
then me too. Like we
Yeah.
were there sort of,
Yeah.
I was my first year out
Yeah.
of culinary school too.
Yeah. And I started working there full time in 2000.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Amazing.
For about almost 7 years. Yeah.
Yeah. And and Jean Georges, you talk a lot in the book about his influence from a food perspective. What about that was the first place you led a kitchen as well, and you leading a team. What was that experience like, becoming a chef growing up in that kitchen?
Yeah. I
Pretty
mean, it was
rigorous place.
like that whole experience was like really good and definitely had some challenges because, you know, while it was 100% my formative years, I learned so much about myself. I learned so much about food. You know, my mentor, Gregory Gourdet, who's like kind of the head recipe developer for all of Jean Georges restaurants, you know, his trajectory was right before mine. So when I was an intern, he was a line cook. When I was a cook, he was a sous chef. You know, when I became a chef, he became, you know, the executive chef, kind of director of the culinary programs. But, you know, so he taught me quite a bit and about, you know, just how to use salt and how to use chilies and how to make food that's approachable, but it's exciting at the same time. So, you know, I definitely feel like I was paying my dues and I was on the right trajectory. You know, I remember getting passed up for a sous chef position, but I eventually got that position. And, you know, I rose up in the ranks to become a chef de cuisine of, you know, Restaurant 66. So I was running a
I
fine
loved
dining restaurant in New
66.
York
It was
City.
so good.
Yeah, yeah,
So good.
yeah. But the problem is at the same time, I was really kind of leaning into a very, very bad drug and alcohol problem.
Yeah.
And, it really started, I would say, within the first year of me working there. I remember the first time I was late. It was probably the second year I was working there. I remember the first time I was late because I drank too much the night before. And, over the course of the next 7 years, there were definitely some good times, but there were definitely some bad times. And by the
Yeah.
end, there were some pretty dark times. And yeah, we had to separate ways. I was actually fired from the company. But, we have a tremendous relationship. That was a long time ago. I've made amends. And, I still credit all of those chefs for, teaching me so much about myself, and just really being open to, being open to taking me back, in my recovery.
Mhm. And a recovery you have made. It's an extraordinary thing um, to know that someone functioned as well as you did for as long as you did. Um, but more than that, the courage I can only imagine, but quite closely in my own family too. Um, the difficulties and the real internal struggle of addiction. How you got the courage to look at yourself and say, I need help, and this time it's for real. How did you do, like, what fueled you to be able to do that?
Sure. For me, it truly was a 7 year battle. And by year 5, I think that was really my bottom. I had checked myself to rehab in Union Square. I was in outpatient rehab, and, my friends weren't talking to me. My family was really disappointed with me just altogether. I kept having to move back home, and my parents, like, always understanding, always took me back no matter what, without questions. But I think I really didn't understand my addiction. I don't think my friends really did either. I definitely know my parents didn't, because they just didn't grow around drugs and alcohol. And I grew up in New York City, it's quite the opposite in like the 90s and early aughts. But it definitely took some time, and after leaving New York City for San Diego, I left rehab early. That did not go well with anyone in my family or my friends. And, a near fatal car accident in San Diego. And then, getting arrested another time for being drunk in public, and then finally moving to Portland, Oregon, and, kind of being a little bit older, entering my, early 30s, and, being in a new town, and having a new perspective on, like, what's going on. My friends were, like, buying houses and having children. And, I was like, hey man, like, I'm, like, getting older. Like, I need to get, myself together. Like, I don't want to live like this forever. And it really took me meeting people who were in Alcoholics Anonymous. Actually, I got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. And it really took meeting people who were sober, who were living their lives. I met some chefs who were in recovery, and I would, go and hang out with them. And then we'd be just totally cool, chilling, like, sober. And then I would go straight to the bar after, and it was just this back and forth. And, I met a friend, and they're like, you should go to AA. And I was at a point in my life where I was like, I just looked inside the mirror, and I was like, hey, do you really think you're done doing drugs and drinking for the rest of your life? And I could really tell myself that the answer was yes. And I went to an AA meeting, I think a couple of days later, and that was 12 years ago, and I haven't looked back.
How many days?
Uh, it's actually in the book, like, exactly counted. It's like,
There's, like, at the time
yeah,
that you wrote
yeah,
your forward, it was like
it's like exactly
4,500 days.
Yeah, it's like exactly counted to the day the book came out.
Yeah. Oh, to the book came out. I was wondering if that was like
Yeah,
when you were
no,
writing it. I mean, that it is a triumph. Like, it is a
it's
human
12 years.
triumph. It
12
really is.
years.
I hope
Yeah.
you give yourself that, because I know it is not easy, but um, you have really shown so many people, and I know inspired so many people with that story. It's extraordinary. So you moved to Portland. Why Portland?
Well, Portland, I used to visit Portland when I went to college in Montana. We used to come to raves out here. So,
Oh, by the way, can I interrupt you 1 second?
Yeah.
Say that I forgot to tell you that I'm drinking this on your behalf, and it is not a cocktail, because I'm not
Okay.
an ass.
Okay.
Um, This is a strawberry basil shrub that I'm drinking. I was told that I should be making your coconut vinegar shrub from the book, and I
Yeah.
lost track of time today. So I'm just drinking soda water and a strawberry basil shrub that I had in my fridge in your honor.
Thank you so
Um,
much.
but that is, anyway, cheers to you into that story.
Cheers.
Tell me, Portland, excuse me.
Yeah. So I actually, I have, the first time I came to Portland was probably in like 1993, a long time. I actually have the picture of me, from way back then, the first time I was ever in Portland. So I always knew about Portland, but my friend had moved here. He was an old roommate and a very close friend, and he had moved there, and he was a chef here. And the hotel that I worked at for the past decade was opening, and they were looking for a chef. So I moved here to actually work there. And some things happened, and parts of I didn't quite work there right away. But I did end up working at this kind of Asian cafe called Saucebox, which is like a very old Portland restaurant. Unfortunately, it closed because of the pandemic. But I got my footing there. I got sober there, and I did end up working at the Nines Hotel for the past 10 years. So it's funny because it was an ask from a friend about an opportunity, but moving here 100% changed my life, because literally when I went to that job at Saucebox, the sous chef there was like, "Hey, my name is Tom, and I haven't drank in 2 years," and that was really a pivotal moment for me to meet someone who hadn't drank in 2 years, who was a chef, who was working, and that's kind of what got the wheels turning about getting sober.
So you did it all in Portland.
I
It
did.
was
I
in
did.
Portland. That's right.
Yeah,
It didn't
it
start
was.
before you
Yeah,
moved there.
yeah. And
Amazing. I
I
mean,
just started
my
going
soft
hard.
spot for Portland now. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. That said, Portland, while one of the most beautiful corners of the world, is known for not being one of the most diverse places in the world.
No.
Although it does have incredibly diverse food, which
Yes.
is, and amazing food, and a rich culture and diverse culture in its food scene, but not necessarily in Portland at large. How did you feel being an African American chef in Portland? Did you find community there? Was it?
I think, well, I've definitely had moments, large periods of my life where I've been, one of few minorities, and one of few like members of the community of color. But that's always been counterbalanced by like growing up in New York City, or living in New York City for 10 years. Why I learned how to cook and cooked. But I went to a predominantly white boarding school. Montana is not a very diverse place whatsoever. So I've kind of accepted, and I'm okay like living in the space. I kind of do my thing, and I'm happy to work. But I will say that I've been here for quite some time, and it's fabulous to see that there are more chefs of color on the up and up. And 10 years ago, maybe not so many, but just even generationally, I think there are a lot of younger people who live here who 10 years ago were probably very, very young, and now 10 years later, 12 years later, 13 years later, they're in their 20s, they're out in the community. So I think there's a lot more visibility for people in color in Portland right now. But I don't know, I think it's very interesting because yes, it's categorically, statistically, it's a fact that this is like one of the whitest towns in all of America. But as you have noticed as well, our culinary scene here is extremely diverse, and we have so many different types of restaurants, from great Thai restaurants, and great regional Thai restaurants, and regional African restaurants, Guyanese restaurants, Jamaican restaurants, we have so many awesome cultures. We have, Haitian food carts. I'm not the only Haitian chef in town. And we also have a huge collection of makers and people who have, kind of been scrappy and pivoted because of the pandemic. And people are on the up. They're opening carts, and their carts are turning into restaurants, or they're selling sauces and stocks or pickles at the farmers market. And they're being able to expand their brand. So I love that there's a lot more visibility for the BIPOC community here in Portland, and especially with the racial reckoning that we've just been through, in our call for social justice. There's been a lot more space made for the communities of color here, and especially the culinary community of color here.
Well, Portland is also lucky to have you, because I know, especially this year, when we shot in Portland, I would think about the fact that we felt like we were going through a triple pandemic all
Mhm.
at once shooting that show. We were obviously in the COVID-19 pandemic, simultaneous to the worst wildfires the country had ever seen.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and the, the protests
Mhm.
and civil rights upheaval, and the, the obviously the protesting was the good thing. It was that the counter to it that really, rocked everyone this year. And
Mhm.
watching that civil unrest in Portland and how Portland struggled while we were shooting there was really eye-opening, I think. um, Coming into that city, it was nothing. It really was different living there this year than anywhere else in the country in many, many ways.
Yeah,
But
I
you've
mean,
truly been a leader and an advocate for the culinary community there.
yeah, I mean, I'm grateful. I think one of the things Top Chef has given me is, a wider platform, and I think it's important that when we are given these opportunities, that we should be really grateful for them, and it's important that we use them to help spread as many messages as possible. So, I'm happy to I 100% understand the plight. I come from immigrant parents. Haiti is a very, complicated country historically. As one of the first, Black republics, it's been ravaged by deforestation and dictators. So there's still a lot of political unrest there. And, my parents, they don't love going back because they've really kind of want to leave parts of their old life behind, and they want to focus on their lives in retirement in Florida, like, because they worked very hard their entire lives. Um, but yeah, I mean, I get it. I've had to work really hard for the things that I have in life, and you know, just because I've made it doesn't necessarily through working hard. It 100% does not mean that everyone else can get it just by working hard. And I used to always think that, not always think, but I used to always want to believe that by working hard you can get through in this world, and by putting your head down and grinding you can accomplish anything you want. But it's really important that we realize that that's not the case for everybody, because there's institutional racism, there's a lot of unfairness, there's police brutality, there's so many things that can stop us dead in our tracks no matter how hard we want to work. So I think it's kind of unpacking that as a community, and just making sure that there are opportunities for everyone to succeed, because this country 100% has enough for everyone. It's all about just getting an equal piece on everyone's plate.
Access. Access is key, I think. Not that there isn't enough. It's how it's distributed, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So you went went into very successful recovery in Portland. You were cooking Southeast Asian food at departure, but your food changed when you left, or I guess it was already starting to change through there. But the
Hmm.
food of everyone's table
Yes.
is a mix of many things, but it is distinctly its own. Because your food changed a lot when you got sober, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about, you've mentioned a little bit about health, and the cooking in this book. This book has a very specific point of view that if you don't know, you could miss, actually,
Hmm.
because you don't make it necessarily. It's not on the cover.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
but it really does speak to the way you believe we should eat and how you've been eating the last several years. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Sure. For me, when I got sober, I just wanted to change so many different parts of me. I wanted to dive in. I got really into running. I just wanted to step up my workouts a little bit. So I signed up for CrossFit. It was like 13 years ago. CrossFit was like a thing. And,
It's
CrossFit,
still a thing.
that's still a thing, a little controversial, but
Okay, true
what
enough.
is
But yeah,
it? But
what isn't?
yeah. Um, but back then the paleo diet went hand in hand with CrossFit. My coach was like, "Hey, you should try to go paleo." Everyone in CrossFit is paleo.
Everyone's doing it.
13 years ago, and I'm not afraid of diets. I was vegetarian throughout all of college. Um, I ate everything as I was learning how to cook, but I was like, sure, I'll give anything a try. I'm 100% absolutely open to everything right now. So a lot of it just made sense right away. Like getting rid of anything with preservatives, additives, food coloring. That was like very easy. Anything processed, and understanding what processed food means, and that was very easy. Um, grains and legumes, understanding that, you know, sometimes not everyone has adverse reactions to those foods, but, you know, a lot of them have anti-nutrients, in which that means that it contains parts that inhibits your body from kind of processing all the nutrients in them.
Absorbing, yeah.
But yeah, but it took me going off, I think I went off dairy first. No, I went off dairy first, and I took a year off dairy, and I had some at a wedding a year later, and I got super sick, super bloated. And I did the same thing with gluten. I went off gluten for a whole year, and I had some pizza after a year, and I got super sick. So, you know, for me, it really took
Sad
kind of
face.
an elimination.
Pizza makes me
I-
sick. Because also, by the way, Portland has amazing pizza. It's like a secret weapon in Portland. That's what I learned in Portland this year. There's other good stuff too, but
Yeah. But it took taking those things out of my diet to realize that they don't agree with me. But I think the biggest lesson I take away from the paleo diet is that understanding that while, you know, Mother Nature makes all these amazing ingredients and all these amazing things are grown and manufactured, you know, not all of them are the best foods for you. You know, understanding that something like grapeseed oil is made by a high chemical process, you know, to extract the oil from those seeds. Whereas something like avocado oil is made by simply squeezing the fat out of the avocado, you know. So, you know, it's about making these small choices and just taking out all the bad stuff and leaning on the good stuff. You know, you can literally eat as much, you know, kale and salmon and sweet potatoes and strawberries as you want, you know. But, you know, I honestly, I don't love kale. You know, I think it's like kind of chewy sometimes.
bold,
and,
bold
you know,
thing to say,
so,
chef. You heard it here first, everyone.
so
Gigi does not love kale.
so we're gonna add lots of ginger.
Kale marketing board, which is like a
We're gonna-
mafia, I think,
yeah.
is going to be on your ass.
We'll add ginger, we'll add garlic, we'll add chilies, we'll saute it, you know, or, you know, we can cook it with coconut cream. There are all these ways to cook it so it's actually delicious and tasty, and you can eat as much of it as you want, and you shouldn't have any guilt about it. So, you know, while it is a diet book, it is, you know, dairy-free,
I
gluten-free,
don't know if saying it's a
soy-free.
diet book.
Well, I think I like to call it a dietary distinction book.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, I like that.
Yeah. So
because it's certainly not about like dieting with a
No,
capital D.
no,
It's
not
about
that.
feeding your body nutrients and
Yes.
emphasis on nutrient dense food, right? In fact,
Yeah.
I wanted to read quickly and then I have one more. I have so many questions, but you know, we're gonna fill up the time before we get to other people's questions. But there was one paragraph that I wanted to read because I thought it captured like such a beautiful note of you explaining this book. Um, Today, my cooking reflects a pigeon cuisine informed by the cuisines I love and featuring the flavors I crave. You'll taste the bright acidity and chili forward dishes inspired by both my Haitian upbringing and my deep affection for Southeast Asian food. You'll enjoy the deep, complex character wrought by unhurried cooking, from the French approach of my formal culinary education, as well as the equally worthy but often slighted techniques from North Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean, balanced by the practical considerations of a busy, normal life. I feel like that's just like beautifully succinct.
Thank you.
And reflective of like all the gorgeous food in here. I mean, I can't even, the pictures just don't do it justice, although your photographer was insanely talented.
She's amazing. Yeah. You know, I think for me, like how I want people to use the book is, you know, you want to eat a little bit better. We're all coming out of the pandemic. I think it's perfect timing. You know, like I've 100%, just like everyone else, have relied on comfort flavors for the past year to get through everything. The weather's warmer, you know, asparagus is popping out of the ground, you know, layers are coming off. I think the book is a tremendous resource for getting the family together and just making some helpful decisions. And there are plenty of recipes in there that you can literally pick up any of the items, you know, at your grocery store any day of the year. Even if you live in a small town, I think there's tons of recipes that have 100% completely everyday ingredients. And then there's a couple of ingredients that you're gonna have to shop for. And I tell you exactly how to find them, how to store them, if you store them in your pantry or if you store them in your freezer, how to use them, and how to make great things that you can keep in your fridge. And there's a huge sauce chapter, pickles, preserves.
Huge.
You know, you can have that arsenal. You know, a lot of these things keep for some time. You keep all that stuff in your fridge or in your pantry, and you're ready to go to get something really fast and really flavorful on your table. Really cool.
Well, I also think there's so many ingredients that may be foreign to, an average American pantry, but at the same time are reoccurring in so many places in the book that if you buy a big handful of chilies, of a chili that you've never used before, you're going to find ways to use them. So it's, you use them so many different ways. Coconut milk, like the ways that you employ ingredients, I think it's just so easy and smart in this book. And it's one of the reasons I love it. JJ, your co-writer and a good friend of mine, actually sent me, I don't know if you know, he sent me an email. I printed it on paper, which I will then recycle. He says, "Hey G, here's a list of my favorites from the 200 plus recipes, ! By the way, people, 200 recipes in a book is astronomical. Like the average cookbook is 100. If you're really ambitious, it's 150. And the fact that you wrote 200 recipes in this book. JJ and Gigi, follow me here, says, these are the things I've made again and again, long since we finished the book. Sweet plantains with onions and thyme. He calls this Haiti goes to the CIA. Legume, am I pronouncing it right?
Legume, yeah.
Legume.
Yeah.
Stewed Haitian vegetables, don't be fooled, it's everything. Eggs and greens, same. Halibut with spiced tomatoes, and then he puts in big exclamation points, turmeric, ginger, cardamom. I'm like drooling now. Haitian marinated whole fish, wow flavor. Haitian stewed chicken, citrus, habanero, thyme, so good. Pickles, dead simple, very spicy, delightful. And I've had your pickles because you won the challenge with your mom making pickles on Top Chef, which ultimately led to you doing a version of it at Restaurant Wars, which I'd like to say led to you opening Con in Portland. Not that I'm taking credit for that. Fermented pine nut dressing, which really intrigues me. Red berry shrub with coconut vinegar. Tried to make tonight, didn't have a chance, but I will do. Citrus cooler with cucumbers and herbs and loads of fresh citrus zest. If you guys out there in Zoom webinar land are not drooling at that little list of greatest hits from this book, then I don't know, then you are like, then your palate is dead. But what would be, before we take questions, like the thing that people should start making when they open this book? Like, what's the first recipe you think?
I mean, I personally think the first recipe is the easiest one, and it's cucumbers with like a Chinese style preparation. It's coconut aminos, stand-ins for the soy sauce, and you simply, it's super simple. Cilantro, sesame seeds, garlic, a little bit of chili oil, which you make, and you quickly marinate the cucumbers, and it's ready to go. I think cucumbers are really accessible. You dive into a couple of alternative ingredients because you're gonna have to get the coconut aminos, and then you get to make the chili oil, which you get to keep in your pantry. So you're already kind of stocking up your pantry by making this dish. I also love the jerk cauliflower. I think it's really representative of the book. The book starts with two, hefty vegetable chapters. And when we talk about getting more vegetables in more creative, interesting ways, I think, it's a beautiful dish. It's really beautifully spiced. It's a little bit spicy. It's got that beautiful jerk, that Jamaican cooking style, cooking method with allspice and bay and ginger. And a little bit of coconut sugar, and it's just a beautiful whole head of cauliflower. And another one of my favorite dishes is the roasted chicken, because I think I too love a good roasted chicken, and who doesn't love a one-pan meal? And it's good any time of the year, and you can definitely customize the vegetables that the chicken cooks over for any time of the year.
Okay, we have a lot of questions. That sounds good. For the record, also, when I first opened the book, I opened it to this page. Which is warm coconut chia pudding with dried mangoes and cherries. And I don't know why, to be honest, I make a lot of chia in my life to begin with because my kids love it. And it's a great thing to like make in a big batch and keep in the fridge for quick mornings, getting ready for school, etc. But I've now turned to your recipe and I made it 5 times in the last 3 weeks. I'm just saying, it is simple. It's chia pudding, but you make it actually in a way that I generally hadn't made it before. And I'm totally addicted. But I will make all of those other things too. Okay, questions, because we've got a few more minutes. Who are some of the chefs who've inspired you most?
Oh man, I mean, I honestly, I feel like I'm inspired by a lot of people. Definitely Jean Georges, definitely my mentor Greg Brainin, but Marcus Samuelson is a very important mentor figure for me. He's actually a very good friend. When I think about being a young cook in New York City and hearing about Marcus, and he was already working in fine dining. He already had like I think like 3 stars in the New York Times maybe, or for Aquavit. But Aquavit was one of those amazing restaurants
Youngest
that
chef
really,
ever.
yeah, which really blended cultures together. Um, and I just remember, having really crazy dishes there, like lobster with curry foam and chocolate beet cake. I think were some of his old school signature dishes.
Crazy.
And Marcus was already a world renowned established chef. And today, he literally just called me on the day of my book launch and encouraged me. And it's like, hey, this is going to be your life and your story for a little bit. Have fun with it. So now we're friends. He's come to visit me. We've shared meals together. I think he's someone that's really important to me. Also, Andy Ricker. Of Pak Pak fame. He was the first person to take me to Chiang Mai. And I've kind of bounced ideas off him multiple times, and I spent a lot of time with him in Thailand, and he knows so much about Thai cuisine and respects the culture so well. He lives there, and he's helped me a lot in town as well. So there are definitely some important figures in my life. But I mean, I'm inspired by certain people. I think like Mei Lin is a really really close friend of mine. She has an amazing culinary style. Melissa King, I've competed with her. I
Twice.
think yeah, twice.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I feel there's inspiration in almost everything, because I think one of the biggest parts of Top Chef and what I always take away every season, even as a judge, is how much I don't know about food and how much Top Chef inspires me to learn more. So when you're in that setting, you're always trying to learn. It's like, what have I learned from Maylin? What did I learn from Melissa? What am I learning from the chefs on this season? So I find inspiration in a lot of people.
That was actually the question I was about to ask you that someone wanted to know is what's it like now to be a judge?
Yeah.
And what's your favorite memory from your time on Top Chef? And who's your favorite judge? I'm just joking. That's not a question.
Gail Simmons.
I paid him. I slipped him his money to say that. No, I'm just joking.
Top Chef has changed my life every single time I've done it. This is like my third season, and I appeared a few times on the Denver season, but I think filming as a judge versus filming as a cook is, it's 100% different. Like I think it's absolutely great. But I'm a competitor, and I think even to the very end, I was like, oh damn it, I wish I could be in this challenge.
Just
but
say the word. We're happy
yeah,
to throw you back in the ring.
but I'll happily sit here, with Tom and Padma and Gail and some really close friends and enjoy this meal. But I think one of the things I'm most grateful for this last season was just being able to spend time with people, because we're in a pandemic. We were in a bubble together, Gail, and we got tested every 2 days, and we had pods in our bubble. And being able to be around 10 people I love and respect, and being able to feel safe at the height of the pandemic, because we were in this bubble, and be able to talk about food and be around food, that was really special. Because prior to that, I was just sitting in my apartment writing my book by myself.
Yeah, I was just cleaning after my kids and cooking for them. They're not the best customers. So you were 2 months of my year that were easily the highlight. Easily the highlight. Someone wants to know if you used a dietitian to help you understand the nutrient dense foods in the book. What was the process in terms of finding foods for your recipes that had the most
Sure.
flavor as well as nutrients?
Sure. 100%. I am not a doctor or a nutrition. That's why, the book is not, I don't dive in too hard. I think the information that's presented in the book is very straightforward information. I talk about specifically how ingredients are made, how different things that we use every day, from oils to, sauces, things that we buy in bottles, how all those things are made. I talk about the very factual information about what nutrients and vitamins and minerals are in the vegetables and the plants that we are eating that are focused in the book. I talk very, matter of factually about how certain regulations are placed on eggs, and what we should be looking for when we're buying sustainable seafood. But this is all just like very factual, straight up information. that I think is honest. But no, I'm not a nutrition by any means. But I know that eating a balanced diet makes you feel good. And I just wanted to present as much factual information about what's in the book as well. And, there's a very clear chart of, the top 100 superfoods. We can talk about those foods, avocados and berries and salmon and all these amazing things. And it's pretty straightforward that these are healthful ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
And from that perspective, I just, I put on my chef hat. And I look to inspiration from all around the world, from some of my favorite dishes, and a lot of dishes I created for the book.
I mean, and to be clear, that's why I say it's not a diet book with a capital D. It's a cookbook made by a professional chef. About it focuses on deliciousness more than anything else. Correct? Is that safe to say? But speaking of avocados, someone asks, says that they have a very severe allergy to avocados. How do you substitute for it? Because avocados are such a special ingredient, such a specific texture and flavor and usage. Do you have any suggestions for something that people could use as a substitute?
Oh, for avocado? I mean, I think oftentimes when using avocado, I think we're looking for like fat, and creaminess. So, I think kind of different seasons, but I think tomatoes, would kind of give that sense of lushness. I think just adding more olive oil to a dish, like I use a lot of olive oil. I'm extremely generous with olive oil. I think it adds flavor, it adds sheen, it adds mouthfeel, it coats the palate, so it kind of excites you. But I think being able to add fat in different ways might be helpful. You might not get the same texture because it's very unique to avocados, but tips like adding more fats, adding more nuts, adding more seeds. I think I love hemp seeds. Yeah. Hemp seeds are definitely superfood for sure. And they have a light crunch and a nice nuttiness and give you that nice mouthfeel. So.
Great. So many more questions. I'm trying to think of which one is the best because we really only have time for one more. Advice to young chefs of color trying to make their mark.
Sure. I think it's important that we realize that as much as we want life to be fair, it just won't be. And I think it's important that we understand that we're just always going to have to work harder. And this is the world that we live in until things change. And the good thing about working harder is that, you're constantly striving to push yourself and you become self-sufficient and you gain confidence because you can do these things. So I encourage everyone to just learn as much as possible, to set boundaries, to demand to be treated fairly, to demand to be paid fairly, but also know that comes with some work, and if we can find the right employer, the right people to mentor us, the right people to, take us under their wing, and we work hard for those people, I believe that, there can be some good that comes out of that and there can be success and there can be learning. And I'm myself personally working really hard on taking people under my wing and sharing my opportunities with them. So I think, just pushing hard and understanding that it's a grind, but surrounding yourself with good people is going to be the best path forward.
Beautiful. Your Con restaurant, I was just going to ask about Con, the next step.
Yes.
I know everyone, we've run out of time. It's very sad, but you've just wrapped your pop-up, your Haitian pop-up Con, that ran for 3 months and looked incredible. And, even though I've had a taste, I was really jealous of everyone getting to go. So where's the next place people can find you once they've read the book, cooked through every recipe and need to eat your food?
Sure. So I am currently hopefully opening my restaurant in early 2022. Which really sets us back just 1 year because of the pandemic. I think that's fairly decent timing. I think I've realized there are many outlets and avenues as a chef that there are a lot of ways I can be a chef, but I just want to work in a restaurant. That's what I do. So I'm excited to get back in there. And after running Con this winter, it was actually for 5 months, it went time.
5, excuse me. Oh my God.
Really fast, but it was a tremendous experience. And I'm really excited for the feedback that we got, having these flavors brought to the world and kind of some new things for some people, and I'm really looking forward to opening as soon as possible, but that's probably late winter 2022. And hopefully I'll do some pop-ups in Portland later on this year as we get ready for that.